Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We've got myself, Ben Maddox here, along with Matt Pope. We'll do a brief introductions here in a minute. We're going to give everybody another minute or two to join the webinar. In the meantime, I wanted to prompt Matt. He's actually traveled to and worked in the area where our farm today is located. Matt, give a little bit of sense of your background experience there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ben. So prior to coming on board at AcreTrader, worked for an agricultural asset manager with some holdings in the Imperial Valley and in the neighboring Palo Verde Valley. And so I've been down there several times. Great area, very diverse area for agriculture. And I've actually spent some time with the gentleman that's going to be doing the farm management on this property. So excited to have an opportunity to work more with him.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, well, we're at just about 1:03 here. So I will get the webinar started here and we'll get going. So today we're talking about the East Highline 160 farm. It's in the Imperial County in California. That's in far Southern California. Here's our typical disclaimers. And then our brief introduction.
Ben, it looks like you got your video on and the slides are not being shared now. There we go.
Sorry, everybody. We had the quick disclaimer slide and then moving into the presenter introduction slide. So my name is Ben Maddox. I'm Director of Farm Operations, the background in value chain development in a lot of unique areas, coffee, cocoa, some international experience before coming to AcreTrader. And I am an accredited farm manager with the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. Matt?
Yep, thanks, Ben. And Matt Pope here. I am Ben's counterpart at AcreTrader. I have spent the better part of my professional life working in eastern Arkansas, western Mississippi, and northeastern Louisiana, and what we refer to as the Delta, but have also spent pretty significant amount of time with an institutional asset manager, as I mentioned a moment ago. And that really put me in all the major agricultural areas of the U.S. and gave me a tremendous amount of experience with a variety of crop types.
AcreTrader was a platform that's built to provide investors with easy access to historically underinvested asset class in farmland. Our goal is to provide investment grade opportunities to our users with low minimums, low fees, and really full transparency in the underwriting process, which you'll get to see today as we get into the property specifics. Including Matt and myself, we have really a whole team here working full time to carefully curate and diligence the investment opportunities we bring to the site. Before we get started, I wanted to highlight a couple of aspects for the investment process to address some common questions we get about entity investing. There's two major processes when you're going through the investments on AcreTrader's website. There's the Know Your Customer / anti-money laundering process. This basically says you are who you say you are. It's a straightforward process when you register as an individual. But for entity registrations, just make sure you have your entity formation documents. That could be an LLC or a trust on hand to submit those for review. The second part is the actual funding process. This is your first investment on the platform and you're using an entity. It often takes about 1 day to review those formation documents and verify them. And this actually has to be done before you link a bank account. So if you're investing for the first time and using an entity, you may just want to choose ACH or wire as your first investment process. After that, and after your documents are verified, you can then link a bank account to your profile. One of the greatest benefits of investing through the AcreTrader platform is really the ability to diversify within and across the farm economy. We have active investments across 11 states, dozens of farm operators, and all major commodity crops, in addition to some more novel specialty crops like apples. We typically talk about 4 major types of diversification, which you see on the screen here. The first is climate. This gives investors exposure to different climatic regions of the United States, from the humid subtropical climes of the Southeast to the arid intercontinental areas of the upper Midwest. And climate will dictate a number of factors ranging from crop selection, yield potential, and water availability. The second form of diversification we like to talk about is weather. This represents sort of short-term atmospheric occurrences like large rainfall events or hail. Whereas climate will be similar for a large area, such as an entire state, weather can differ dramatically even from one side of a county to the next. So again, having diversification there is important. The third item is farmers. So different farmers are going to have different methods of farming that may be better in one year or another. And you can diversify some of the counterparty risk out of the investment by working with dozens of different operators. And finally, crops. So agricultural commodities are cyclical in nature, and their pricing will reflect this. Investing in many different crop types will help to hedge out poor performance of any individual crop in a given year. But it is important to note that there is such a thing as unhelpful diversification within crop types. For example, you don't want too much exposure to niche crops with smaller levels of production. If you've been on our website or previous webinars before, you've seen this chart. It's essentially showing that farmland has structurally attractive returns, is performed well while also maintaining low volatility relative to other asset classes. You can see volatility here on the x-axis and growth rate on the y-axis. One other item that we like about farmland investing is that the high-level supply and demand function favors land value appreciation. And we sort of have two factors that are driving that. The first is a growing global population, and the second is a reduction in arable land per capita. Demand for food products will continue as global population grows and a global middle class grows, which means oftentimes more animal-based proteins, which means more animal feeds required. We talked about diversification earlier, in particular geographical diversification. Here we see that there are 15 states in the United States that drive 2/3 of all farm revenues. The green and of course the yellow bars here represent homes to AcreTrader investments. So you can see that we have diversified across a large number of geographies and states while still focusing our investments in those top producing states. At a high level, we break down underwriting paradigm into three basic categories that really revolve around soil, water, and the financial health of any investment. Matt is going to highlight how we've applied this process specifically to our most recent offering. But the takeaway here is that there are really hundreds of individual checkpoints that we look for in each property, with a lot of idiosyncratic factors at the local level that can impact investment performance. That's another way of saying there's a lot of specific knowledge and expertise required to analyze these investments. And our team here at AcreTrader has deep experience with real on-farm management across both a wide range of geographies and crop types. And finally, this is just a short overview of our diligence process that really reinforces and puts into context the information you saw on the previous slide. So we talk a lot about the fact that we eliminate, over 99% of the properties we look at in this process. And a good example of that process in action can be found on our farm today. So not only does Matt have experience in this specific area, but he's had some connections who were on the ground as late as last week checking out this farm. And so at that point, I'm going to hand it over to Matt and let him go through today's offering.
All right, thanks very much, Ben. So tomorrow's offering is the East Highline 160. It's a 160-acre ranch in the southeastern portion of Imperial Valley. On the screen, you can see our concrete ditch at the bottom, and to the right, you can see an alfalfa stand on the subject. The concrete ditches are a driver of value in this area as they offer the grower several advantages over their dirt counterparts. And at the top of your screen, you can see a photo of an adjoining field. So this is not on the subject, rather it's an adjoining field. And this field has been hipped up and has yet to be planted. It has the same soils as the East Highline Ranch, the property that we'll be offering tomorrow. So you can get a bit of a better feel for what they look like without a crop line. The ranch has historically produced alfalfa and carrots, but it is very well suited to produce a variety of other crops that are typical in that area. Crops like garlic, potatoes, and onions. And in fact, the only crops you wouldn't see raised on this ranch are those with shallow root systems. So crops like lettuce or other leafy greens. And that's simply because the soils are pretty well drained on this property, and those short roots, like you'll find on those crop types I just mentioned, don't get to spend enough time with the irrigation water and with the fertilizer. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the state view map. And here you can see a state view. You'll notice that we are all the way down at the southern end of California, less than 10 miles from the Mexican border. If we zoom in here, get a little better regional picture. You can get a better feel for where the farm is located. You can also get a better view of the Imperial Valley, which is bound to the north by the Salton Sea, that's California's largest lake, and to the south by the Mexicali Valley in Mexico. Just as the Imperial Valley is a major agricultural region in the US, Mexicali Valley is one of the most fertile agricultural regions there in Mexico. All right. You'll see some investment highlights here on this slide. I'll point out that the ranch is about 98% farmable and again is located in the southern portion of the valley, just east of Holtville. We executed a new lease on this ranch with a farm family in the valley that have been around there for multiple generations. And they have been raising crops on this tract for the past 5 years or so. And in fact, farm a good bit of ground that is adjoining. In fact, you can see here the fields to the north, they farm that, and I believe they also farm the fields to the west. So excited to have them on there. That group has expressed interest in leasing this for up to 8 years, although we only have a 1-year lease on the property right now. We will look at extending that in the near future. And the lease rate is at $400 an acre, which gives us a 4% gross cash yield, and they will be growing alfalfa, and if we extend, they will throw carrots into the rotation as well. And you'll also notice here that the pricing is sub $10,000 an acre. We think that's a pretty attractive entry point into the property. All right, we can go on to the California land value slide. All right, you'll see here that according to ASFMRA's most recent land value study, we're buying at what I mentioned a moment ago is a fairly attractive price. This is made possible through a pause in farm operations expansion, and because the tract is frankly a little bit small for some of the larger investors who are in the area. They typically target properties, say, north of $5 to $10 million, and so this one just does not fall in that window, and has given us a good opportunity to come in here and again buy what we think is an attractive price. All right, you can see a nice aerial view of the valley here on your right-hand side. The Salton Sea is what you see at the top of your screen, and the valley is tilted to the north, so everything drains from south to north into the Salton Sea. You'll see some quick facts about the region here, most notably that it's one of the most productive areas in the US by several metrics. As was mentioned a moment ago, a vast variety of crops are produced on the nearly 500,000 acres in the valley. Everything from hay to sugar beets to lettuce, citrus, dates, variety of crops. This is made possible by the soil profile, water availability, which we'll talk about on the next slide, and most importantly, the climate that allows for a growing season that really extends year-round. All right, the Imperial Irrigation District is one of the largest irrigation districts in the nation. It holds in trust the water rights for the land in the valley, and it's responsible for delivery of 3.1 million acre feet annually. Of that 3.1 million acre feet, about 2.8 million acre feet are used for agricultural production. The balance is used for municipal and industrial purposes. The district is responsible for the operation and maintenance of 3,000 miles of canals and drains there in the Imperial Valley. Another notable feature is that the district is its conservation efforts. Through its on-farm efficiency conservation program, landowners and farmers are eligible to receive up to $285 per acre foot conserved. So in our case, we would split that amount in some way with the farmer to effectively incentivize him to conserve water and to qualify for the payment. Before we move on, I'm sure most of you have read through the slide, but a really interesting highlight about the valley is just where the water comes from. All the water that ends up in the Imperial Valley began in the Colorado River. At the southern end of that river, near Yuma, the water runs through 3 desilting stations, and it's then transported through an 80-mile-long aquifer called the All-American Canal. Once it arrives in the valley, it's gravity fed from the south to the north through a series of 3 main canals that run on the eastern, western, and central portions of the valley, and then are fed laterally across the valley. All that water drains, again, from the north to the south into the Salton Sea. All right, we'll talk for a moment about alfalfa in the Imperial Valley, which is really one of the primary crops that you'll see in this area. It is the foundation of Imperial Valley Ag. It's the basis of most of the crop rotations in that area. If you recall a moment ago, I said if we extend this lease, which we will aim to do, the grower will look to grow alfalfa for say 3 to 4 years and then rotate carrots in behind that. Alfalfa is generally planted in September to November and primarily harvested March through October, but cuttings can be done in this area just about year round. So you'll see those cuttings push out to December in a lot of cases. The alfalfa on this ranch is actually being replanted as we speak. Here in the valley, yields will exceed 7 tons per acre, and a farmer can get up to 10 cuttings per year. After the hay is cut, it's baled and it's sold as feed for a variety of animals. And as you can see here, the majority of the hay grown in this part of the world is used in California's dairies. Carrots, the other primary crop that can be grown on this ranch, do really well on the land around Holtville. In fact, as you can see here, it's referred to as the carrot capital of the world, and it is actually where baby carrots were popularized. As a general note, the Imperial Valley generally raises about 1/4 of California's carrot crop. Carrots can and have been raised on this farm in the past. And again, the organization that we lease the property to plans to implement a carrot alfalfa rotation if we extend the lease past that 1-year period. All right, we'll talk quickly about the soil, water, and financial profile of the opportunity, and then we'll roll into a Q&A. So you can see here at the bottom left corner of your screen that the ranch is primarily loam and loamy sand. These are very high quality soils and in fact have better adaptability than most of the heavier soils in the valley. Generally speaking, the soil type referred to as 115 and then followed by 114 dominate the soil structure there in the valley and probably make up 75 to 80% of the soil. So we're a more adaptable soil than what is typically found. And this soil profile lends itself to great crop optionality, and it's one of the things that we like most about this farm. And again, this property is really well suited to raise just about anything other than those crops with the shallower root system, so your leafy greens. And so that we really like that optionality here. A quick overview of the irrigation capabilities and drainage. I mentioned a moment ago that the valley is slightly tilted to the north, so water is gravity fed in most cases from south to north. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see between the desert area and our farm, the East Highline Canal. That is one of the 3 major canals that feeds from the All-American Canal up through the Imperial Valley. Water feeds into a lateral ditch at the southern end or high end of the field and then can be gravity fed across the precision level to grade field. And on this property, you can apply irrigation via flood, furrow, or sprinkler in some cases, depending on what crop is being grown. Surface and subsurface water then drains into the ditch at the low end or north end of the field. And another thing to note here that does drive value on these ranches, and I hit on just a moment ago, is that we have a concrete head ditch rather than dirt. And these tend to hold up much better than dirt and offer the grower a variety of advantages over the dirt ditches. All right. Financial overview you can see here. We are looking at a 4% gross capitalization rate. And again, that's at the $400 per acre price, an expected IRR of 8%. And then we can go ahead and roll into a Q&A, Ben, if you're ready.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Matt. Just as a reminder, the investment will be live on the website tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central Time. If you have any questions, you can contact us at the information here. We are going to take a few of the Q&A questions here live. And certainly, if we do not get to your question while we're on the air, we'll follow up with you by phone or email after the webinar today. So bear with us as we get these questions. They're not just now coming in. So,
all right, let me get this opened up here and we'll see if we can filter through these. All right, we've got a question here about fire in Southern California. In this area, that is not a concern. You've got a tremendous amount of irrigation and thus water in the area. And it is, generally speaking, never been a concern from what I understand.
Okay, so there's a question about, is there any risk associated with drought in California? So that is a complicated question to answer because it does depend on where in California you're talking about. So if we're going to limit our answer to the farm today in the Imperial Valley, all of the irrigation water that this farm needs is provided by the Colorado River. So the farm is irrigated. And certainly there are long-term potential drought impacts along the Colorado River Basin. It stretches over many states throughout the U.S. Southwest. But there are no particular issues with this farm to date with respect to drought. They've been able to provide irrigation water in all recent years for production.
All right, we've got several questions here about how our acquisition price per acre stacks up to that of comparable sales. And this isn't something we really hit on during the presentation, but we do have a really great comp set. Have probably 15 comps, all of which are within about 10 miles of the property, and those transactions have occurred within the past, say, 18 months. We're buying at anywhere from $1,000 an acre to, say, $4,000 an acre under where those comps indicate pricing. So again, getting a pretty attractive buy in our opinion.
There's a question about net yield on this property. So for all the acre trader investments, we have the gross capitalization rate that we represent on the website, and there's the net yield after that. And typically the fees that come out of the gross cap rate include the acre trader management fee, which is the same across our row crop investments. Then you will also have insurance on the property. And then there's taxes, and taxes will include as well special assessments that might go towards local drainage districts or local irrigation districts. So in this case, you have not only property tax, but also a local irrigation district charge that allows for water to be delivered to the property. So that might be why you are seeing a slightly lower net yield as a percentage of costs than we typically see.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, Ben, and give the viewers some harder numbers to go off of. You in this area through the irrigation district have a roughly $2 an acre charge, and it's referred to as a water availability fee that's assessed on an annual basis. And you have some other charges that are also rolled in by the irrigation district, but those other charges are handled by the tenant in every case. And an interesting fact that we didn't touch on, but is related to this discussion, is that this farm has been owned by the same owner for about 80 years since it was originally developed. And it was originally developed by a land leveling company in the Imperial Valley. And in California, that taxable value resets when the property transacts. And so property taxes on this particular property pre-acquisition were extremely low. And again, they will reset to the value at which the property sold, or the price at which the property sold.
There's a question here about why the lease is for 1 year. So that's a good question. So one of the unique aspects about farming and investing in Southern California is that you really have a year-round growing cycle. Whereas, an investment in the Midwest or even the Southeast to some extent, you're limited to a typical growing season in the spring, summer, early fall. In California, you're really growing almost year-round. And so those lease contracts actually come up at different times, renewal intervals, than you would say for a corn and soybean property. And that renewal interval was actually right in the middle of us trying to get this property under contract. And so the current owner went ahead and got a 1-year lease extension in place with the farmer that we do intend to extend, as long as nothing happens, no extrinsic event, we would renew that lease. But basically the reason there's a 1-year lease is that we're right now in the middle of the renewal period for lease agreements in the Imperial Valley. So.
Yeah, and then just again, to kind of come on behind you, Ben, the tenant, the current tenant, did express interest in going out as far as 8 years on a lease. But because we have not acquired the property yet and would be assuming the lease after purchase, we wanted to offer ourselves greater flexibility. And so we plan to modify the lease on our terms post-closing. Let's see here.
Looking through the questions here, but we do have one question I want to address that was asking about investments in other states. I think this one is about Texas in particular. So we are always looking for new investment opportunities. We try and obviously identify the best ones that we're able to find at any given time. I do think maybe one particular unique aspect about Texas is that it is heavily skewed towards animal agriculture, and currently we don't have any investment offerings in animal agriculture on the AcreTrader platform, but that may be one reason.
All right, here's another question on comps, and specifically why do we think this is selling below comps? And I talked just a little bit about this in the presentation, but not a lot. One of the primary things is this is a pretty high quality property, but it is too small for a lot of the institutional investors or the larger local investors that are active in that area. As far as producers go, as far as landowners go that actually farm that property, prices have been somewhat depressed over the past couple of years, and the majority of them are kind of tapped out on expansion for the time being. A lot of the guys that grow produce are actually feeling the effects of COVID, and so the land market right now, when it comes to these smaller properties, is not as active as it has been over the past couple of years. So it really ties into timing.
I think we have time for about one more question. We're coming up on 1:30 here. Matt, I think maybe if we both want to, I'll start. There's a good question here about, could the water needed for this property ever be diverted upstream and prevent the water from reaching this property? And I'll let you elaborate, Matt, but there's a long history of legal precedent ensuring the water rights of the landholders in the Imperial Valley to the Colorado River.
That's right. And so the Imperial Valley has a third position on Colorado River water, with the two positions ahead of them being a very small district in Yuma and the Palo Verde Valley. And so all that water outside of those two districts is going through the Imperial Valley first and foremost. And they're even ahead of positions like Metropolitan Water District, which provides water for San Diego and for Los Angeles. And so I think anytime that you do business out west, there could be a risk long term, just given the questions surrounding the supply of water. But we feel very, very confident in the position of the Imperial Irrigation District and the water rights that are tied to that land.
Thanks, Matt. And just as a reminder, if we did not get to your question on the webinar, we'll answer it in a follow-up email or phone call. This property will be live on the website tomorrow, 1 p.m., acretrader.com. So please reach out with any further questions, and thank you again for joining us.